Let us march on to victory. Let us march on till victory is won.
Father, we come before your throne this afternoon,
as far as the movie goes.
and we are grateful to be called to this company, Lord God, of great minds, great leaders who are inspired by this moment in our history, these unprecedented times, God. We're asking you, as we bittersweetly reflect on the depth of the words in the song, and as emotions are stirred from having heard them, Lord God, we're asking that you would guide this discussion, that you would help us all to be transparent and authentic and engaging of one another, to even champion and challenge one another as we seek to, from this discussion today, God, find ways to move forward as individuals and to be active and engaged collectively as we respond to the needs of our people in this moment. Help this discussion be honorable and pleasing and acceptable in your sight. And it is in Jesus' name that we give you praise and thanksgiving. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Lamb, for your inspirational words. My name is Lindsey Trevino, and I'm an assistant professor at City of Hope, and I am part of the Bench to Community project that is hosting this space for the Salon Conversation today. I would like to welcome you all to episode 2 of our Salon Conversation series. And I wish that we were coming together under less stressful and less painful circumstances. However, I am thankful to be a part of this important discussion. I am also hopeful that this discussion, as well as others that are occurring throughout this nation and all over the world, will propel us toward action and sustainable change in systems that we know stack the deck against communities of color. So a little bit more about Salon Conversations. This was born out of the Bench to Community project. And the Bench to Community project is a project that unites a multidisciplinary team of researchers at City of Hope, including myself, Dr. Rick Kittles, and Dr. Dede Teteh, with community stakeholders, including Tanya Fairley, who you'll hear more from today, to address disparities in breast cancer incidence and outcomes due to adverse environmental exposures. And I want to just emphasize that this project started in the community. It belongs to the community, and it's very important to me and to everyone involved that the community has a voice in the project. I came on board later because I believe in the goals of the project, and I want to eliminate cancer health disparities and environmental racism. This project is also personally important to me since I am the only biomedical researcher in my family. And as the only biomedical researcher, I am always asked questions about medical information that my family hears on the news and on social media. And these interactions, these daily interactions, constantly remind me of how important it is for scientists to convey information to the public in a way that can be understood by everyone. And I am also from a community that is negatively impacted by environmental racism. So these issues are very important to me personally as well as professionally. Throughout my career, I have consistently been one of the few Latinas in my programmer department. I've witnessed firsthand how important research questions that would address health disparities and positively impact communities of color are never asked because the researchers and research participants are not from those communities, not from our communities. And so by working together, researchers, especially researchers of color and community stakeholders, can empower people to make decisions that better their health and also empower people to advocate for policies that will eliminate health disparities. The goal of the Salon Conversation series is awareness, education, action. And our first episode was an introduction to the project and focused on hair care products and breast cancer risk. And so our initial thought was to continue that conversation, from different perspectives. But in light of recent events, episode 2 has pivoted to systemic racism, and rightfully so, since we know that the issue of health disparities is a complex interplay of many factors that includes policies that perpetuate systemic racism. And recently, COVID-19, the pandemic, has made this all too clear. So our discussion today on Juneteenth, so happy Juneteenth to all, is a timely and important one. And I thank all of the speakers for their time today. Let me briefly go over logistics. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on the Bench to Community YouTube channel. All participants will be on mute. If you pop in and you're not on mute, please mute yourself if we don't get to you in time, because we don't want to have any disturbances or interruptions of the speakers. If you have questions for today's speakers, please use admin 1 questions in the chat. And I'd like to thank Maya Walker, who's a graduate student at City of Hope, and Dr. Kittles' group for supporting that space during today's conversation. With that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Kittles for his remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Trevino. My name is Rick Kittles, and I am the Division Chief for Health Equities in the Department of Population Sciences at the City of Hope. I'm also the Associate Director for Cancer Health Disparities at the City of Hope. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome you all to another episode of Salon Talk and what has turned out to be a growing program around this issue of the environment and health for people of color. I definitely want to make sure you all understand that this is a grassroots research program. And I appreciate all of the work that the community partners have done in helping to elevate this and their activity in this work. We have, at the City of Hope, committed ourselves to eliminating health disparities in communities of color in our surrounding community. We do that by actively engaging in research as it relates to cancer disparities, sickle cell anemia, and other diseases that disproportionately impact people of color. So we are geared and highly excited to continue to work in this area. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that we are having these discussions today within the context of Juneteenth, which is a historical and cultural day for Africans in America. And so we need to recognize that and always look back in terms of our experience as it relates to helping us move forward as we head towards our future. Also, and most importantly, we have had another horrific series of police brutality episodes in our communities, which have led to mass protest and unrest in the streets of America. Now, this demands our attention, and we must remember that freedom is not free. And we have much work to do in this area, and I'm excited to join hands and work with you all as we move forward. So once again, welcome and thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Kittles. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bing Turner. I'm the Executive Director of the Heritage Education Group. We are a community-based program that own and operates certified farmers markets. Our focus is health, education, and wellness throughout the community. In addition to the work that we do in the community, we also are embarking on launching a grocery store in North Louisiana this fall. So in addition to the work that we're doing here in Southern California, our work stretches out to the South. And for today, I'll be co-facilitating this event with Dr. Dede Teteh. Dr. Dede Teteh and I have worked together on a paper. And also we did some work together at Loma Linda many years ago. So I'm glad to be working with her once again on this project. Dr. Teteh?
I was on mute. Hi, everybody.
Okay.
Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Kittles, Dr. Trevino, Reverend Lamb for that prayer, and being a part of this community with us. Thank you for saying yes to all the speakers that said yes. My name is Dede Teteh, and I am, as Dr. Trevino has stated, the co-investigator on the Bench to Community project. Shout outs to Ms. Tanya Fairley for really being the brainchild of this project, and really appreciate her support and as a community stakeholder with these conversations that we're hosting with folks. So I am your co-moderator for today, and we have some powerful speakers, awesome individuals in the community that I'm just so excited for them to have this conversation with you all. So we're going to be organizing this in 3 different segments. The first segment is going to tackle our health during these times. The second segment is going to really be in discussion about reimagining the institution of policing. And lastly, the legislative actions that we can take now in November and after to create sustainable changes in our communities. So our goal, like was stated earlier, for these Salon Conversations is to bring awareness, to educate, and also to provide, again, practical action steps for sustainable change. So as a reminder, we are going to take questions at the end. However, during these discussions throughout the forum, please provide your questions to Admin 1. Thank you, Maya, for organizing those questions for us, and we'll take all of those questions at the end of all of the panelists presenting their information. So with that said, so the first segment is going to be, again, on mental health and the role of faith leaders. Dr. Clay and Reverend Lamb are going to be leading this discussion for us. And I'm going to begin our talks today with just a little bit of information about mental health. So according to the California Almanac, 1 in 6 Californian adults has a mental health need. 1 in 20 suffer from serious mental health illness. And these statistics are even worse for our children, in that 1 in 13 children in California suffer from mental illness. And of course, when you add the layer of race and ethnicity, the statistics are more even confounding and worse for our underserved populations and communities. So Dr. Clay, I want to say thank you for being with us today. Thank you for saying yes to this conversation. Thank you for being present. Please introduce yourself to the audience, and the floor is yours for the presentation for segment 1 related to mental health during this time of crisis. Dr. Clay?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation as well. And it's my pleasure and honor to be able to be here for our community in this capacity. If it's knowledge sharing, crying together, like whatever we need to do so we can stay in this fight longer. So I'm hoping that our time together does yield fruit, not just for all the folks who showed up to come and glean and receive, but for all of us collectively, because we know we need each other. Like, I know we have a ton of experts in their various industries, and I'm just grateful for each of their presentations, even in advance, just knowing that we're all going to walk away filled up and renewed and ready to continue this good fight. My name is April Clay, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm the CEO and founder of a mental health organization called Clay Counseling Solutions. And so our primary focus is providing mental health services that are culturally relative and responsive to the community that we serve. We are located in San Bernardino, so of course that's mostly Black and brown folks, but it doesn't matter what walk of life they come in the door from. We just want to serve them the best way we can. I do want to just check in and just see how everybody's doing. So if I can pull the audience, if you will, engage us for just a moment. How are you guys doing? Please use the chat box and respond to this prompt. How are you feeling during this racial unrest in our communities? Just take a moment and then we'll read out some of your responses. How are you feeling during this racial unrest? Tired. My soul is heavy. I'm blessed, uneasy, angry, weary, more angry, more tired, optimistic, disturbed, hopeful, anxious but hopeful, confused, very tired but thankful, so that the community is together and stronger than ever, used to it, frustrated, fired up, angry, ready, stressed and unsure about the future, tired, angry. And so if you have any others, please share them. But these words are heavy. And I think they're not just heavy in our minds, they're heavy in our hearts and heavy on our bodies. And I want to just tell you, as I read out some of your comments, I physically feel you. I feel you, and I feel your pain. I feel your unrest. And I just want to remind you that we're all in this together, but we don't have to stay here. We don't need to stay feeling this way, because it's time for us to stand up. And one of the best things that a person can do when they've been fallen victim of a bad circumstance or situation is to rise back on their feet and fight. And so one of our fights is to come together like this, to come together in spaces of this nature. And so I do have a couple things I want to share with you. The first is, when it comes to self-care and community care, I want to just impart some information, and it may just be reminding and refreshing what you already know. But for those of us who, like me, who have never studied it or haven't had an opportunity to be formally introduced to it prior to an event like this, I want to give new knowledge, and that will help equip us to fight this good fight a little bit better and be strategic as we battle this thing called racism. I have stood up in favor of declaring racism as a mental health crisis in the county of San Bernardino, and I do speak in favor of acknowledging that mental health is affected by us when it comes to racism as minorities, right? But I would say it's not just minorities that are affected, it's all people. If you are watching videos where a human being's life is being taken because of his race, that's going to affect your psyche if you have a heart and a mind like I do, like all of us, right? So we want to just acknowledge that starting out, it's not just black and brown issue, it's a people issue, it's a human issue. So racism is a mental health crisis. And then what do you need to know? So some key points I would say when it comes to self-care is knowledge. I absolutely love and admire people who are able to defend themselves, but I respect those who cannot. And I do believe that we have to share information for those who don't know so that we can all do better together. And so one of the things I want to make sure that we all walk away from this conversation having a deeper understanding of our need to equip ourselves on racism. We need to understand that racism isn't just something that's happening to us. It's something that we're born in. If you're born into this country, you're born and indoctrinated into a white racist society that has taught us to hire certain folks, to employ certain folks, to give the higher wage to certain folks, certain genders, etc. And it no longer looks the way it did in the 1960s, although some aspects of it are rearing their ugly head. But microaggressions is a common face of racism in America. And it's important to understand what microaggressions are. I'm just going to name them, just going to call them by name. Spiritually molested. Ooh. I'm going to call those microaggressions by name so that you can hear them if you've never heard them before. And I would implore you to go and research them so you can understand and study what you might be exposed to or experiencing and witnessing on a day-to-day basis, because it does have an impact on your mental health, or it could have an impact on your mental health. So microaggressions are common acts of racism, and they may be coming in the form of micro insults, micro assaults, which is more like blatant racism, and micro invalidations. And so without going into too much depth, micro insults, micro assaults, and micro invalidations can be conscious or subconscious, but they happen on a daily basis, from the small acts like walking into a grocery store or a department store and having the clerk follow you because you look like you might steal. And what does that look like when we know the wealthy and the poor are still alike? Like, what does that mean? So when you're an African-American male or female of a certain age being followed, of any age being followed, when the door's locked 5 minutes early and you're the only customer that was approaching the door, that type of thing. So these are microaggressions. So we need to all understand how they affect us as well. So as a mental health practitioner, one of the things I like to do is educate folks on our cognitive, our ability to understand our bodies and our ability to be able to impact change, because we know that shaman and the spiritual leaders have taught us that we can change how our body responds to situations once we're aware of our bodies. So being in tune with our bodies, our mind, our spirit, knowing that it's not just a physical form that we have a mental and physical state, so that physiological interaction does have an impact on how we live day to day. And as you experience or exposed to microaggressions on a daily basis, if you're not consciously aware of what you're experiencing, they may be taking their toll on you. How would you know that you've been exposed to a microaggression? If you're replaying that situation in your head, you may have been exposed to a microaggression. If you're telling your neighbor and now your brother and your cousin and your mother, and you still can't believe that this person said that thing or did that thing to you, you may have been exposed to a microaggression. These are acts of racism, and we need to be able to defend ourselves and protect ourselves against them. But the first thing is knowing that they exist. And then the next thing I'd want you to know, and I won't keep you long with this topic, but I just want to equip you. Racial battle fatigue is a culmination of exposure to those microaggressions, those daily slights, over a course of time. So if you, like me, are in your 40s, your beautiful 40s, that's a lot of microaggressions you may be exposed to. You may now begin to feel anxiety. You might be replaying these situations. You might be having nightmares as a result of conversations with your employer or even your subordinate. I'm a university professor. I've had students tell me, I'm not calling you doctor. What does that do to you over time? So understanding that these racial slights over time can affect your physical state is important. Because when you end up in the hospital describing symptoms to a doctor and they tell you they've ran all the tests they can run and they think it might be your work and ask you what you do for a profession, it's those microaggressions that might be killing you. And when I say killing you, they can literally end our lives early. The next thing I want to just remind you is that this is a battle. So if you're in combat, if you're in war, you don't go unequipped. If you go unequipped, you're going to die first on the field. So we need to make sure we equip ourselves. So first with knowledge, and then with the power to battle these things so that we can stay in the game longer. Let's just put it that way. So racial battle fatigue it means that we are in battle. So these symptoms that you experience after being exposed to microaggressions over a long period of time look like combat victims. So if you were over in war and you came back and you're shell shocked and you're having nightmares and flashbacks, etc., it looks exactly the same for minorities being exposed to racial slights on a daily basis. That is not good for us. That's not good for any of us. African-American women specifically, I want to call your names out, tell you I love you. I am you. You are my sisters. You're my mother. You're my cousin. I need you to understand that we are dropping off and dying faster because of things that are killing us, like high blood pressure, like anxiety and high blood pressure. Over time, they're going to talk more about this, I'm hoping, but over time, those things can really take on a physical form. And I believe in research is showing us that racial battle fatigue is associated with that. So the more we're exposed to these microaggressions and acts of racism, subtle acts of racism because of our workplace, maybe where we go to the gym or the grocery store we choose to use, wherever we are, if we're exposed to these over time, we may be exposing ourselves to something that's just deadly for us. And so that being said, what are some things you could do to protect yourself? Run. Okay, I'm just kidding. Don't run. We have to live in this society, but one way we can fight back is to understand better how we can protect ourselves from being exposed to microaggressions. And that might mean clean up your Twitter and your Facebook. If you have people on your social media that are hurting you, delete, remove. It's okay to unfriend them. I mean, I'm giving you permission, go and block your church pastor if that's who's causing them. Maybe you might need to relocate. I do believe that faith is important, but if you're in an environment that's hostile for your spirituality because of the racial slights, that's problematic for your walk too. Now you may begin to question your relationship with God. So instead of going there, start looking around to see where these racial slights might be coming from. And I'm saying that because that's what I had to do. I had to leave the church I was in because the racial battle fatigue was kicking my butt. When you say all lives matter and blue lives matter, but you can't say black lives matter across the pulpit, I'm concerned about my mental health. I can't be in an environment that chooses to not acknowledge the state that we're in. So I want to just kind of put that out there in the universe to just bring awareness to the fact that we have choice. We have an opportunity to decide. We can choose which friends we love on daily versus those that we choose to, check in on from time to time. but not necessarily talk to every single day if they tire us out. And then the last thing I was challenged to give you guys is just a little information about what to say with our youth when we're talking about racism. As a mother and grandmother, I get to love on some young people, and my adult children would tell you that it's taken me a little while to get to the place where I'm willing to listen. But I think the best thing we could do for our youth right now is to listen. Black children, especially children who are living in more affluent areas, are living in an environment where they're raised with peers that don't look like them. So they may be in shock right now. And so the best thing we can do is to love on them, to listen to them, rub their back, give them opportunity to express themselves, and then when it's time, equip them with the knowledge that they need to have. If they think that we're the enemy and they need to fight us so that they can keep their friends, that might prevent us from being able to help them heal while they're in the middle of this battle. So we want to encourage them to express themselves. We want to love on them. And then when we have opportunity, we want to guide them so they can know where the well is, so they can get replenished to be able to fight this fight longer. And so I'm going to hand it over to Reverend.
That was so good. That was so powerful. I had my mic on mute because I was like, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Clay. Thank you so much. That was impactful. I think I'm glad we are recording this because some of us need to go back and replay what she said over and over and over and remind ourselves of spaces and people and places that we shouldn't be anymore to protect ourselves, protect our mental health. And that the perfect segue to the next conversation that we're going to have right now with Reverend Lamb is the role of faith leaders in this discussion. You know, Dr. Clay just shared, in order to protect your mental health, there are some institutions that, even though we've been a part of it for so long because it's a part of our culture and some of us is a part of our DNA, they may not necessarily be the healthiest for us. So we're going to have a little bit of discussion about the role of the faith leader in this fight, in this marathon that we're running. So I'm going to level set for a little bit before Reverend Lamb gets on to share his perspective about what's happening right now. This discussion is going to be coming from the Christian perspective, which is historically has been used to justify slavery. So at the end of the 17th and 18th century, slave masters began instructing African slaves in the tenets of Christianity. So Black scholars like Penn, Lincoln, and Mamiya discussed the formation of the Black church from invisible institutions held in secluded locations called harsh harbors. These were locations where the slaves hid from their masters and were able to really authentically use what their masters, quote unquote, gave them as Christianity, coupled it with their African-centered culture, and created something that they can live with. They created something that they can stomach. They created something that will give them what they needed for the time that they were in. So from slavery on to gatherings of communities and churches during the civil rights movements, the church has been a part of bringing communities of color, specifically Black folks, together for not only praise and worship and to hear a good word, but also to plan and to help support our communities in ways that was needed when people wouldn't allow us to be in certain spaces. But the question that I have right now is, has the church fallen deaf and blind to the needs of our communities presently? According to the prophet Martin Luther King, and for those out there that are conservative Christians, it's like Martin Luther King is not in the Bible. That is okay. Prophet just simply means teacher. He said, and I quote, 11 o'clock on a Sunday is one of the most segregated hours in America. So Reverend Lamb, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this discussion. Thank you for being a part of the solution that we're hoping to take away from please introduce yourself to the audience and share with us, what is the role of the faith community in today's discussion that we're having?
Good afternoon. Quite an introduction. If I didn't know you cared about me, I'd be like, that sister just set me up. Nah, listen, and I am George Lamb, and I'm privileged to be the president and founder of the Faith Advisory Council for Community Transformation. We are an alliance of pastors across the Inland Empire and have a couple of chapters emerging in the Bay Area and in San Diego. who are community transformative in our missional focus. We particularly focus on a couple of different things: health and wellness, child and family services, and housing, and are presently seeking to respond to our housing dearth with developing some affordable housing projects utilizing church properties. So pray for us. I'm privileged also to be representing SEAM. SEAM is the Economic Empowerment Movement and the Coalition for Cultural Change, which has emerged as a part of a SEAM initiative. The church is ill-prepared to respond to the pandemics that we are currently facing, both in the physiological and health-related sense, in the cultural space as a society people, in the systemic racism sense, and unfortunately due to lacks of knowledge that is necessary to be effective in engaging our people at this particular time. And I don't levy that as a blanket statement that is applicable to all faith leaders. There are some that are extremely enlightened and extremely insightful and are learned in many, many, many ways and have multiple disciplines and professions in conjunction with serving their call. One of the things that I think has emerged is a recognition that we require a re-education in a number of respects, because we're faced with some things that have never been experienced before. So in some ways, we've seen elements of what we are experiencing now in the past. But I think what's happening now is a convergence of a number of different things that are occurring at the same time. And as a result of that, people have significant uncertainties about where they're supposed to be going and how to respond to what needs to be done. And so, I'm teaching on a couple of things that I just decided that I would share with you guys, because the discussion has to be provoked by people like Dr. Clay, who would have challenged the pastor in her church to be something different than what he thought he needed to be at the time. I think that until our community collectively begins to respond, like our young folks and millennials in particular, who now in the age of transparency and Google, can ask Google anything and even oftentimes corrective things about what the pastor just said from the pulpit. I have seen incidences where young people are yelling out in the back like that's not what it says. And so I'm sorry, Google's paying attention to this conversation even now. One of the things that I think is important for us to understand is that in this day and age with the need for transparency, is to be okay with saying, I don't know. I don't know that a lot of pastors in the faith community are willing to do that. And then number two, seek out the information necessary to equip and prepare themselves so that they can respond to the needs of the community in a much more efficient and a much more effective way. I appreciate what Dr. Clay was sharing about the whole mental health component, because that's one of the things that I think pastors can be better at providing, and that supports in those particular areas, and making sure that when the laying on of hands does not heal, that it's okay to turn people over to professional help and to connect them with resources that might minister to their needs, whether they be physiological and or emotional. The faith community has an opportunity. So I'm teaching this, guys, and I think it's important to just frame as I share from this perspective going forward. Cultural shock has occurred in ways that we weren't prepared for, didn't anticipate coming, and now are even unsure about how to respond to. The revelations about the systemic racism and the depth of disparity that is manifesting itself in so many different ways, and the prevalency of those disparities across every determinant of health in every area of success that we might have thought we were thriving in, to recognize that we are not thriving in ways that we thought we were, and in ways that we should be, if equity, true equity, were being experienced as we hope to achieve at some point. After the shock has occurred, now there's an awareness. The theme of this particular discussion is centered on the fact that, hey, I'm woke. I'm aware about some stuff that I wasn't aware of before. I'm taking it in very, very differently, even in a visceral way when I used to watch it from the peripheries or the sidelines, because I thought that I had ascended beyond that, or I had achieved some levels of success that didn't warrant me being treated like so many people that look like me. Once the awareness has occurred, now that's the responsibility of the faith community to broaden and expand and explore and even educate with respect to these things that we are learning. We got to be okay about talking about it in real and transparent and authentic ways. And I don't know that even we as a people are prepared to do that. There's so many different variances of what constitutes people of color. And with respect to that, you know, those lived experiences don't always translate. There's some commonalities and some things we share in common, but then there's some other things that are very, very deep and long-standing and can't really be understood by anyone other than the person or people groups that have experienced it. And so racism as it pertains to being Black in America is traumatic, and it continues to be, and the church has not become in the past what it will need to be going forward. The next thing is a cultural shift. A cultural shift has to occur, and if the references of Dr. King and others across the history, modern history of us as a people in America, we know that the church has been instrumental, right, in making that available, in shaping and incubating and giving opportunity for movements to occur, and for the galvanizing of a people to be able to think strategically and plan an action that needs to be taken. Even with today's unrest on a global perspective, there's still no strategies that are emerging. And I think that the faith community should take lead with respect to helping to develop strategies that move us from where we are to where we need to be. One thing about chaos and disruption is that it breeds innovation and opportunity. And so in a study that I was teaching in late November, God gave me a revelation and a download right in the middle of the message that I was sharing. And I stated that very thing, that in 2020, it would be a year filled with chaos and disruption. It's on tape, it's on YouTube. I'm not laying false claim there. It's just God gave me something to say and I said it. Don't own it. I just shared it. So in this moment, innovation and disruption could be the positive contrast one to another, and chaos and opportunity could be the opposing contrast one to another. And so as uncomfortable as this is, as sad as it is, as heavy as it is, as difficult as it's going to be, we can look for occasions to find innovative responses to the opportunities that exist. And I think that it's the responsibility of the faith community to lead in that regard. And then after the cultural shift occurs, then the cultural change is possible. Hence the name Coalition for Cultural Change. I believe that our culture is a combination of a couple of things. Our history plus our values equal our culture. Our culture plus our behavior determines a lifestyle. And so we as a people have a certain aspect of lifestyle that is starting to reveal itself in our vulnerabilities, comorbidities, and things that are owned by us as a people in a disproportionate amount to other population groups in America. I think that's a resultant of lifestyle. there was a time when we had no choice in those things, and we ate what we could, we did what we had to. But now that we have choice, it becomes a matter of practicing some behaviors that are going to shift our culture, because we're reversing our lifestyles, and we're eating healthy, we're being active in our living, we're pursuing a different quality as a people that will ultimately lead to cultural change. The last thing that I think that I need to say, right, is that it's all up to you. Those of you who practice your faith and who engage with spiritual leaders, they should be being challenged. If they are unapproachable and resistant to hearing from the heart of the people who have issue and seeking true counsel and guidance and leadership, then as Sister Clay did, maybe you should find somewhere else to be, because there are some who are very adept and skilled and passionate about meeting the needs of their people, and it's about kingdom advancement and not fiefdom development. But that's something that is on tape, so I ain't gonna keep pushing that. Dede might just blast me out like that, you know. That's my little sister, guys. And so, you know, the Coalition for Cultural Changes has done these things. In early April, we began to champion, with the partnership of the public health systems of San Bernardino County and Riverside University Health, to use churches as testing sites in the African American community. We had began to establish some successes very early on in the process. There are a number of different organizations that are endeavoring to do that now, but God had given us an entree into relationship that enabled us to be a little bit more effective and efficient and get out of that. Out in front of that. And so 5 sites were established, 3 in San Bernardino County and 2 in Riverside County. There's a posting on the screen of one of those things that we've been privileged to help establish. And as a result of that, now there's education and outreach and the coalescing or leveraging the resources that the faith community has with public-private partnership to make sure that the most amount of people that can be tested are getting tested. The challenge to the system was, if you know that there's a disproportionate number of African Americans at about 1.5 times our percentage of the population that are dying as a result, and even a greater percentage of those who are becoming infected rather by COVID-19, then why are you putting testing sites in communities where there are no African Americans or people of color? And when Harvest Church in Riverside, 3 weeks ahead of everybody else, was doing drive-through testing, that provoked me, because I live in Riverside and I had to drive all the way across town in order to be tested. But what about my people who don't have those capacities and would not go to a community where we're not very comfortable and oftentimes are not even welcomed on the west side of Riverside? And those things that Dr. Clay talked about, those micro assaults, occur routinely because the disproportionate number of us in that community makes those majority of folks feel like they can do that regularly, and it's embedded in the culture. That's a long conversation.
Sure is, Reverend Lair. Thank you so much for that commentary. We're going to keep this conversation going. If you guys have questions for Reverend Lamb, please, again, put them in the chat box directly to admin question number 1. I'm going to shift the focus a little bit, Reverend Lamb. If you don't mind, we're going to bring you to answer some questions. It was all love. I didn't set you up. Dr. Clayton set you up a couple of months ago. But this is something that's already on people's hearts. And I didn't even have to set up that discussion. But it's you know, for some of us, there is no separation between our spirituality and who we are as individuals of our race, as Black people. So I think it's important for us to have leaders like you that play several different roles in the space of the church as well as in the community, and you have the ears of the community. So not saying that you're deaf and, you know, blind to what's happening, but some of our church leaders are. And that is a conversation that we're going to continue at the end of the second and third segment So I'm going to go ahead and have my brother from another mother and father being
Hey.
and keep this conversation moving with Take a Knee. Let's go.
So now we got the police. We're going to talk to the police. Once again, Bing Turner. And the name of this section is called Take a Knee Part 3. If you want to hear Take a Knee Part 1 and 2, I would implore everyone to listen to a podcast produced by myself and a partner, Billy Ross. It's called the Kaleidoscope Podcast. A little under a year ago, we had Captain Abram, retired Los Angeles Sheriff Department, and retired Detective Supervisor Brox from the LAPD speak with us on a lot of the issues that was impacting African Americans as it relates to law enforcement. This was a year ago, and like what a difference a year makes. And so now we have 2 retired vets who've been with the department for a combined over 70 years. I'll first let them introduce themselves. Detective Brox.
What's up, Brother Ben? How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Can you give the audience a little intro of who you are?
All righty, Michael Brox. I spent 35 years on the Los Angeles Police Department, working myself up from the ranks of police officer all the way to Detective 3, which is a detective supervisor, working several different units and throughout the city. I'm a lifelong resident of Los Angeles in the city of Gardena. I'm still a resident of Los Angeles. And I'm also an author of a book called Being Black in Blue, which is a memoir of things that I went through as a Black man in a blue uniform. I have some ideas about things that are going on in our community. I talked about them before I wrote the book, within the walls of the police department, outside the walls of the police department, and then I decided to put it on paper and to share it with as many people as I possibly can. So with that, I'm ready to get into this.
Okay, and we also have on the line Captain Bernice Abram with the retired LA County Sheriff Department. Captain Abram?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you now.
All right. Well, you know, this is my first experience coming on with the Zoom, so I'm not very good at it. You can see me okay, though?
We can. Yes, we can.
Well, I'm Bernice Abram. I went backwards within law enforcement. I started with the Marshal's office, went to the District Attorney's office for a few years, and then went to the Sheriff's Department. I have over 30 years in law enforcement combined, and it was a great profession for me at that time. I was part of, probably as Michael was, part of the Rodney King riots, and I look at what's happening today, and I will submit to all of you that the hardest position right now working in law enforcement is for anybody that is Black. Trust me, it is not easy to be out there with the people that you care about. You know how they feel, you live that, and then you have to listen to all the other stuff you hear when you get back at the station about other things pertaining to people of color. Within my 30 years, as Michael did, I worked through the ranks and became eventually the captain of Carson Sheriff Station. I was there for 2 years before I retired. And what's unique about a captain in the Sheriff's Department is that we police agencies that don't want to hire their own police departments. So I would have technically been a chief of police by another agency, such as, you know, Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, any of those agencies that have their own police departments. So it was a good job, but very difficult.
So since you guys have this illustrious career in law enforcement, you guys are retired, and you guys are looking at it from a different perspective, I'm sure, after you're out of the department. You hear this term that's being used about like defunding the police, which I personally do not like that term for a lot of reasons, but in the spirit of time, I just kind of want to get right into it. I like to use the word reimagine. How do we reimagine policing in our community? What's another way or another opportunity of looking at law enforcement? Because I think now is an opportunity for us to hit the reset button and to make some changes. So I'll have Captain Abrams answer first.
Thank you. Well, you know, as was said by Dr. Clay, knowledge is power. You have to know where you've been to know where you're going. And defunding or reimagining, as you said, police department, regardless to who it is going to be very difficult. I would highly recommend what they do is provide some civilian outside oversight on the funding that they're currently getting, with providing line items, if you will, when they do review or evaluate the budgets. The reason I say that is because a lot of agencies get plenty of money to work on, but once they get that money, no one tells them how to use it. So they use it how they want to. So if you're saying that we need more money in training, or we need more money in equipment, then make sure that money goes to equipment and training and not to new cars. You understand what I'm saying? So I mean, that's just one way of looking at it, but accountability is the key. You know, just like anybody in life, if you don't make them accountable for whatever it is they're doing, they're going to continue to do what they do. And that's where we are today. No one is holding people accountable for their actions. And all actions have consequences. So the consequences have to be swift and immediate. They can't be 2, 3, 4 years later. They need to be now. So we have to make it clear the consequences are going to be handed down behind all actions and policies that are violated, period.
I think part of the reason why a lot of things happen to Black folks as it relates to law enforcement is there has not been any consequences. And, you know, one of the things that you said that kind of stood out was, you know, we need to be part of, community members need to be part of the review process as far as budget is concerned. To Detective Brox, how do community members begin the process of engaging law enforcement to say, hey, I want to be part of this civilian oversight board? Or how, if there's not one in existence, how do we begin the conversation of creating these review boards or people that provide civilian oversight to law enforcement?
Well, in the late 80s and in the 90s, I did write to the chief of police and others about simply what we're talking about now, is retooling the police department, and specifically in our review of uses of force. Right now, what we're asking the police to do is to police the police, if you understand what I mean. So here we are, we train a group of police officers, we send them out, they do what they do, and then we judge what they do. In order to stay with that thin blue line, the police have to judge based on what police believe. Now, as you see, the world, the entire world is absolutely in an uproar about some of the uses of forces that we've seen. So in order to retool the police department, what we have to do now as civilians and as people that have knowledge is to write. We've got to put our action, our discussions and actions into paper, into our councilmatic persons, into our chiefs of police, into our local governments, to get a civilian review board that reviews uses of force, that reviews the dollars and figures that go into the police department. That's what's going to move things and make huge changes. Now, if you notice across the country, there are several police agencies, when they use the word defund, officers either quit assignments or resign from the police department, which I find is absolutely, it's unimaginable actionable that you take your profession, because you basically what you're saying is if we can't continue to do what we've done for years,
Right.
we quit, which I find is absolutely a slap in the face to every community member. Another thing that I want to jump to real quick is that we have to have more of us in law enforcement positions. We have to have our members of community in law enforcement. Right now, we have a very small segment of people that look like us, and I'm going to speak just for the Los Angeles Police Department, a very few of us. And the ones that are there, it's over 48 to 51% of us that are ready to retire right now. But they're not hiring us fast enough to replace those folks that look like you and I. So I also think that those that we do hire should come from our communities. Who better to serve our community than us? Who better to come to your house than someone you know? So with those things in mind, and exactly what Sister Bernice is saying and others have said, this is the time for major change and major retooling of Los Angeles Police Department and other municipalities within Los Angeles.
What other services do police department, what services do police departments, what things do they do that can actually be outsourced? Because one of the issues, or one of the commentaries when you hear about like defunding the police, is that you'll have, a lot of police unions will say, who's going to investigate crime? Who's going to investigate the rape kits? Who are going to go out to do welfare checks? Are those things that should be done by police departments, or are those other opportunities where other municipality or departments or county departments or offices can actually participate in? Like, does it always have to be the police department that do these functions?
Can I answer that?
Yeah, sure.
Well, as you know, right now, they already have private companies that do jails. They work in the jails. So you have correctional people that private agencies run the jails. There's a number across the board of different positions or jobs or areas that civilians or outside people can do. We have to really ask ourselves, why do people feel like it's okay to use and abuse other people like that? And the reason they feel that way is because they get away with it. I don't care what it is. If they get away with it, they feel like it's okay. If there were no videotapes out there, I will tell you, as you sit here in front of this camera, things are still going to be going on. The camera is the only thing that's saving us. There is no reason why you can't have a bank that we should be able to, as outside people or community, send in a video and link it directly to a database where we have all these videos available. Why is it that somebody has to hide the video before the FBI comes and gets it and provide it to the media? We have to be transparent. The problem, one of the biggest problems, is that people who are speaking today in law enforcement that are part of law enforcement today, they cannot be transparent in many ways because that's their livelihood. That's their job. They're going to get feedback and kickback and everything else from the people that they work with, from the city council making the department look bad, making the city look bad, making officers look bad. They can't speak what they really feel because they're in it. So you have to have people that are from the outside that have been there and done that to help provide assistance, or even community members that have expertise in the area. CPAs, people who do force tactics. There's tons of different places where you can provide outside people and outsource. And we need to review everything, not only in the beginning, but in the end, to make sure that it's placed exactly where it's supposed to be.
What about the training? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
Brox?
Go ahead. Well, to your question, in firms outsourced or other entities working with the police department, there are things like the sister that spoke earlier, the doctor. mental health. We do have a thing called a mental evaluation unit, but some of law enforcement are in that position. There are police officers that are being paid in our mental evaluation unit. Now, police officers that are in the mental evaluation unit, they get the same 6 months training that any other officer does. 6 months of training, no certificates, no anything, but they're working a mental evaluation unit. What I would say is we have to have our healthcare workers that staff that and perhaps come in and write proposals to assist the police department to do those things and to respond to the mental, when we have a mental health crisis. Those are some of the things that can happen. Right off the top of my head, I wish that I could come up with a bunch of things that law enforcement can't do, but I want to stick with what I know. And I heard you mention being training real
Absolutely.
quick, and I want you to go ahead and ask that question, and then let's see what we come from there, what we can tune in on.
Well, sure, and we can actually land the ship at this point, but I will end with this question. Like, I get into these debates online, and the first thing that another law enforcement would say, oh, it's just bad training. And I'm like, it's always just bad training when it comes to African people, when it comes to Black folks. It's always bad training. You don't hear them executing bad training on people in the Jewish community. It's always Black folks, it's always bad training. How can we begin to shift that dynamic where the community has some input or some say in the training of law enforcement officers? Because I think it has to start before these guys go out onto the street. So is there an opportunity there for us to?
If I may, first and foremost, we need to extend the training of a police officer. What we're doing right now is we're training a police officer, a 21-year-old. We're training them for 6 months. And then we're giving them a badge and we're giving them a gun. We're telling them to go out in a community and serve the community as a law enforcement officer. We have other people that don't have that ability to basically carry a gun in society that go to school for a year or 2 years and get training. But yet we do it for 6 months, and then we put people out there with little to no education. There are people out there that have GEDs. There's nothing wrong with a GED. I don't want to get the pushback on that. But people that don't have life experiences, that don't have formal education, and you train them in 6 months and you send them out there. So there needs to be a longer period of training where a community group of mental health workers, a community group of financial people, a community group that's based on the communities they serve, to come in to get their portions of training within there so that we can have some cultural training. Right now the police departments give us what's called cultural diversity training. It's online and people buzz through it, they patch through it, and they don't actually get interactions from people. It's an online computer system that we go through training on. And it's better if we had physical training where people are there and share their stories. Sometimes they send us to the Simon Wiesenthal Center in West LA to get cultural diversity training, but people are falling asleep in classes, but they're not being held accountable for that because someone says we have to. But you get them early on, recruits. You get them early on and make that a pass or a fail, a participation, non-participation grade in learning how to deal with diverse groups. And then you will start to see less. And also recruiting before they get to training. Let's get the recruits that are coming from the communities that we serve. And I want to say one last thing about recruiting is that you have to start early. You have to start early. Our recruitment efforts are people that are already in high school and maybe the first year of college. But let's get those young folks and let's bring back us, the people that look like them, to show that it is a profession, that we need them to serve their communities, and then perhaps, just perhaps, that we start to get an influx of people that are genuinely concerned, because the people that we have, and not all, but a lot of them, have no vested interest in law enforcement or the community in Los Angeles. And I'll say this about vested interest. We have the people that don't even live in Los Angeles that come to and from that police in the greater Los Angeles area. They're not residents of Los Angeles, so they have no vested interest in the lives of community. So here we have a problem, and I like this question that's coming up, drug intervention. That's another thing, great question right there. We need that too. But those are things that we need to do and things that need to be changed. We need to change the training. We need to change recruiting. We need to change oversight on uses of force. And those are just a few things that I can come to mind. And I think Bernice can chime in on some other things that can help out.
Bernice, you got 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes to.
Well, I will say this. I believe that the state and the federal government provides enough money to agencies to provide training. They do. It's mandated training. They train from the beginning. They train all year long. The problem you have with training is if I go to training and I'm new, brand new, and when I go to the street, I get a one-on-one training officer, and that training officer tells me, forget all that crap you just learned in the academy. I'm your daddy. You're going to do what I say do. That's how that works. Now that's the real. So that's where we have to make an impact. We're getting trained, but when you get a training officer, that's where they tell you, forget what you learned. I'm going to teach you the way I want to teach you. So keep it transparent and keep it real.
Thank you. That's as real as it gets.
That's as real as it gets.
So with that said, we're going to move on to the next section, and I thank you too for joining us. We have some questions that have come up in the chat. On top of that, we have some questions that we're going to be asking. The two moderators are going to be asking towards the end. I want to shift this to Shannon Lawrence. Shannon, are you there?
I'm here. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I got you.
All right.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Shannon Lawrence. For about the last 20, 25 years or so, I've been actively engaged in politics and government, serving as, grassroots organizer. I've served on the staff of a number of political elected officials, a governor, a local mayor. I've run for office a couple of times, local city office a couple of times. But, I spend the majority of my time in the political arena now doing where my passion is, and that's in helping communities to get to get people elected who have a real desire to serve. I have a program that I developed. It's called I Can Lead. It is short for Instructional Candidate Leadership, which is a boot camp that trains anyone, frankly, in the basics and gives you the basic tools and the foundation you need to win a political campaign, which is different than being a good politician. We have a lot of good politicians, but there are a lot of really good people that don't know how to win a campaign that could serve just as effectively, if not better, in some communities. And so my job is to help them to do that. And I also consult with candidates and help them to win their elections as a political consultant at the same time. So I've taken, 20 plus years of working with some of the brightest minds in this country in politics and government, on a policy side as well as on the political side, and just trying to help my community take advantage of the tools that I have to help their own communities. But I did want to start off with this though, and I just think it's so appropriate. What a time to be Black in America right now. Boy, oh boy.
My goodness. Wouldn't trade it for the world.
I tell you.
Wouldn't trade it for the world.
But I do know, and here's, I can talk all day long because I do have that politician spirit in me sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I can talk all day long about who I am and what I do. But I do know, being that you have some very pointed questions that you wanted to make sure that we discuss on this call. And so I want to make sure that we hit those things.
Sure. Dede,
can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Shannon, for being a part of this discussion. So I wanted to kind of begin this segment with some emails that many of us have received in our mailboxes, with some tweets that we've all seen on our feeds, on social media, etc. So there's a slide in front of everyone where it is quite a time to be Black in America. So the first question that I have for Shannon, Mr. Lawrence, is, there are several businesses, political figures that are doing a lot right now, showing solidarity for Black lives. There are people that are coming out that are saying Black Lives Matter that, everybody's looking at them like, do we though? Because your history says otherwise. So talk a little bit about that. Are these allies or?
Well, I think yes, they can be allies, but I don't necessarily think one statement makes you an ally. It's your continued actions does, right? I will say this though. I think what we're seeing right now in America, it's evident that that there seems, I think people are realizing that being on the wrong side of history is an actual thing. I mean, we're seeing this with the destruction and removal of statues around this country, of people who determined today that their actions then were on the wrong side of history. And I think there is almost this debilitating fear within leaders nationally and locally to not want to be on the wrong side of history, especially those leaders that have any sense of a moral compass right now. I do think that, and what's really interesting is that, up until about 3 months ago, America really operated in a way where everyone pretty much went along just to get along. We just, as long as my house wasn't affected, then what happens outside this house, I'm concerned, but whatever, right? And I think now that everyone has been home for the past 3 months, they're realizing it does impact me. And they're literally taking looks in the mirrors and realizing, am I who I present? Is this the person who I want to present? And I'm saying this for both people, but also for corporations, right? And I know on the slide we have Mitt Romney with his quote with Black Lives Matter. Was it a political stunt? Maybe, perhaps, but we also know that Mitt Romney swings on that political pendulum very independently, right? In terms of he does what he needs to do when he's in his home state of Utah. And then he also does what he needs to do when he's on C-SPAN and the whole world is watching. And he just operates like that. And so do I think he genuinely believes that? Do I think, yes, but do I think he'll say that when he's in that coffee clutch conversation, at his neighbor's house? Probably not. He's not going to say it. He's going to stay far away from him because he's going to do what he needs to do, right? I saw the quote with PetSmart. I thought it was really, really interesting, right? I do think that there is a genuine care with a lot of these corporations, but I also think now they have the cover of direct social action and activism. They almost have that cover to be able to express their progressive values without necessarily rattling stockholders, like what would have happened 6 months ago. Do I believe that for all of these corporations? Absolutely not. Some of them are putting Black Lives Matter up like Korean business owners were doing it in 1992 riot, saying that this business is Black owned. We know you're not Black owned. We know you don't care, but we know you're also going to say what you got to say in order to keep your business from being burned down. There's a lot of companies like that as well. So, and I think the same for Starbucks. I think until we see like real long-term change from these folks, And I mean, and not just change in the sense of words, but I'm talking about, you know, actions where they're putting money back into these communities. They are actively making sure that there are Black people on their boards of directors. And I'm not talking about, you know, the good-natured white person who's going to step down so we can have inclusion, but I'm talking about really identifying qualified Black people like the Ken Frazier's and Ken Chenault's, finding qualified Black people to put on your board to add value to your board, not to promote diversity. So I think when we start seeing that, then that's when we know it's real.
Shannon, I want to thank you for that. And that was very clear. And I think those were a lot of the questions that Dede and I were both actually getting and that we were talking to amongst yourselves. I want to shift a little bit and ask the question about the legislative process and how important is it for us to engage our legislators as this thing is unfolding. I remember us having a recorded conversation on the Kaleidoscope podcast, indeed, that, you know, every letter that you write to a senator or a congressman represents, I believe it was like 5,000 people. Can you speak about that? But we really want to know for this conversation, some tangible action items that we can do, and what are those implications?
So before we even get to the legislative process let's just be clear. The legislative process begins when a person turns 18 years old. The moment they are eligible to register to vote, that's when the legislative process starts. Because at the end of the day, the people who are serving in office are the people who are making the decisions. And so, you know, let's be clear about this. People that are elected officials, they don't just fall out the sky. These are people that we have made a conscious decision to say, I want you to represent me, or by our inaction, say, I don't care what you think and if you represent me. And so I believe that before we can even talk about legislative actions, we have to talk about being registered to vote. And let me just say this. I caught some flack on in social media because I low-key called out a famous rapper because he had mentioned that he did not know that he could vote. And basically, let me just, you know, if there are people that you know that are in your family that have been incarcerated, today is the day to call them and say, make sure you can get your voting rights reinstated. Because we have to do that. We can no longer stand by and allow misinformation to keep our communities politically held hostage, because that's exactly what's happening when we're not registering to vote. Now, once they get to office, yes, for every letter you write, that does count for a certain amount of constituents' concerns. It depends on the size of the district. It can be anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000, sometimes 10,000 people, because they do believe that it takes a considerable amount of effort to just sit down, write a letter, send an email, and let an elected official know what you think. Because let's be honest, it's not like their emails are exactly easy to find. So you put some effort in to tell them how you feel about a political particular issue. But the other part to that is that one of the things that what COVID-19 has allowed to happen is no legislative body, especially local legislative body, is meeting in person anymore. So where before, going to a city council meeting in Los Angeles, you would have to be there at 10 o'clock. I got to go through security. I got to get up. I got to beat traffic. I got to find parking. You don't have to do it anymore. If you want to engage a LA city council member, a Gardena city council member, a Torrance city council member, all of those meetings are online. And oftentimes they're Zoom. You simply go to the website, see when they're meeting, log on. You can send questions in just like we're doing on a Zoom call, and it counts like it's public record. And so your question is in the public record. And when your concern is in the public record, there's a level of accountability that elected official has to respond. And if they don't respond, you can say, We ask this question in public. Why are you running away from it? And so I think now it's easier than ever to engage politicians on issues that you care about. You couldn't do that before. And I think we're able to do that now. So I hope that kind of answers it. I'll go deeper if I need to.
Well, yeah. So this is another question that we had. You know, with the changing of the technology and people being home and people having access to these meetings, what are some of the new emerging models for community governance? Like, what are some new ways that we can sort of, like when we talked about law enforcement, reimagining ways of engaging political people, and what are some of the ways that we can actually work within our communities to impact change?
So let's start with the community piece. I think one of the things that's critical that we have to understand when it comes to community organizing is, and you know, we when I was growing up, we did this. Get to know your neighbors. Like seriously, like get to know your neighbors, talk to them, you know, because what you'll find is that many of you will have the same exact issue. Whether it be, I want a stop sign at the end of my block, we need our trees trimmed more often, they have too many red curbs, so we don't have any street parking, whatever it is, but you have to talk to them. You know, so when your kids are at the park playing, talk to the other parents. When your kids are playing Little League ball, talk to the other parents. And what you'll find is that you're gonna begin to develop community. Because one of the things that you gotta remember is that when politicians, have you ever noticed, Bing and Dede, that when you get that, you kind of get pigeonholed during political season, right? We're talking to Black women, we're talking to Black men, we're talking to this group, we're talking to that group. Because when you're trying, it's just like a marketing campaign, and Twix is trying to talk to people who like chocolate. When you find out your market, you begin to pigeonhole them in that market. So one of two things can happen. You can either allow them to determine what your interest is, or you can get with your friends and neighbors and you tell them this is what we're interested in and make them respond to that. And what we're seeing is, with all of the protests happening around the country, everyone is having to respond to defunding police. Last week, Black Lives Matter and allies went to LAUSD and they made a protest. They had a protest. But whatever your issue is, if you get enough people that have the same concern, you can either show up on a doorstep with a direct action, you can have a letter writing campaign, an email campaign. When I worked in organized labor, we would sometimes, well actually when I was in college too, doing organizing, but we would have phone call campaigns where you're literally just calling into the office and jamming up lines. And what happens is, the reason why you do that is because you need to be able to show that there's a groundswell of support, so that now you are determining the conversation instead of letting them or the newspaper determine what the interest is. And so that is one way, and it really doesn't take a lot of work that you can, that the community can be engaged. The second part about changing governance is what I talked about before. I mean, with technology now, everything is pretty much online. One of the things that I think you will start seeing is you're gonna see politicians doing more and more work in the community. When you see them in the community, I don't care if it's a toy giveaway at Christmas or a turkey giveaway at Thanksgiving. Those are the times those are the times, especially with public events, don't be afraid to engage them. Don't be afraid to walk up to them. I was watching a special on millennials or Generation Z. And Generation Z right now, nationwide, they are saying, no, we are taking the bull by the horns. And they are declaring, we're not afraid of you. We will engage you when you are at dinner. We don't care, because we pay your salary as taxpayers and you will respond to us. I'm not saying approach somebody at dinner. Let them have their dinner and eat in peace. But what I am saying is that, especially in those public spaces, especially when they're having their events, engage them. Don't be afraid to say, I need to talk to you. Schedule a meeting, because all of them will always have their staff with them. Follow up with their staff. Let them know what your issues are. And when that happens enough, they will begin to set up their own community meetings, to respond to the people because they don't want to be engaged in public. And so they're going to say, we need to have a community meeting. This is when it is, because they do want to control as much as they can, and rightfully so. But until they realize that the community really wants to talk to them, then they're not going to change.
Thank you. Shannon, thank you for those comments. Pull up to them even at dinner. Sorry.
No, I wouldn't do that. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. You're not gonna have nobody mad at me, Dede.
Use your discretion. Use your discretion. But the point is to engage.
Have to engage.
Engage. So I want to move the conversation a little bit to there are so many organizers and so many organizations in this space of building solidarity, of coming together as Black people, Black Lives Matter, LA, Black Lives Matter, Inland Empire, Color of Change. There are so many petitions that are out right now. There are so many GoFundMe fundraisers, etc. Myself personally, I am overwhelmed with the amount of information that is out about police brutality, about all the different organizations that are in this space. So one of the main questions that I have for you is, how do we assess all of these different organizations, all of these petitions on change, colorchange.org that people are pulling up left and right? Are policymakers actually looking at these petitions? What do we do as individuals to engage in the process in that way when we give our money, when we give our time, when we put our name down on petitions? Tell us a little bit about that interaction and how does that help us support sustainable change?
So let me just be really clear. Elected officials and policymakers are elected to represent districts, communities, jurisdictions, things like that, right? If you're doing an online petition, one huge red flag that it may not actually reach the politicians is if they don't ask for your zip code. Because politicians, they'll get it, and if they don't have a zip code attached to it, they're like, oh, this is nice. I have 100,000 signatures, but I don't really know how many people that I represent care about this. I know 100,000 people do care about this. Because you got to remember something, at the end of the day, a politician they have a desire to serve, but they have a desire to serve they're elected to serve their community and the larger community, but it's their community that elects them, not the larger community, right? And so if you're signing a petition that's going to Congress, if it's not asking for your zip code, then when it lands on the steps of the Congressional Black Caucus or the Democratic Caucus, whoever, they may get that whole list, and the first thing they're going to do is, okay, split it up by zip codes. 63% came from this district, 10% came from this district, so they know where the priorities are. So that's one big red flag. The other thing that I would honestly look at, because there are people who take advantage of people. There just are. There are people who will tug on your heartstrings and play with your emotions. Do research. I mean, if you get a request for money, Google it. Google the organization. See if they're legit. If you don't find enough information that doesn't make you comfortable, don't send your money. Don't engage with them, because I'm not saying that they're a scam, but they really may not be doing what you're asking them to do. So do the research. But I will tell you this one thing that I will say that I think can really have an impact if you are being philanthropic with your money, is identify a political action committee that you believe in, that you agree with. Identify it and participate in their programs. And the reason why is because those political action committees have a lot of influence on politicians, because they can bundle $10, $20, $50, $100,000 during campaign season, and it gives the people who run that PAC, it gives them the power to be able to advocate on your behalf in a lot of ways, because they know that this is a powerful political action committee and I don't want to lose this funding. One of the things that people don't understand is that raising money for a political campaign is hard. It is not easy. And just to put it in perspective, Think about how hard it is for those Girl Scouts to sell cookies. And they got cookies. And they're little girls. And they're cute. And we like them. Imagine how hard it is for someone to walk up to you and say, hey, I really want to make effective change in the community. I know, we were rocking together for a while. Can you write me a check for $50? And how many times have you said no? But yet, one mailer may cost that candidate $10,000. And so they got to get the money from somewhere because they need more than you to vote for them. And so that's where political action committees become very, very important. And there are a number of them in our own local communities that are doing really good work. There's one out of Sacramento called the Impact PAC. You have another one, LA, the Los Angeles African American Women's Political Action Committee. They do a lot of good work. I mean, there are a number of them all over. You just have to, kind of see who's out there, do the research and give. And I think that's an excellent way to make sure that you are being in the process, getting engaged in the process, using your money wisely, and making the change that you want to see.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so that is the conclusion of all the 3 segments that we have. We're going to now go to some questions and comments that people have shared throughout this segment. Can we just give our panelists and all of the speakers a round of applause? I know your mics are mute, but you can kind of put your hands up and give them a clap. Thank you all for phenomenal. Thank you all so very much. So we have a couple of questions for Detective Brock and Captain Abrams. And one participant stated, I'm wondering what the panel thinks about the LA's People's Budget proposal. Is it a potentially feasible model for for community solutions that's feasible? Any of the panelists would like to take that? We'll have Detective Brock go first, if that's okay, and then other folks that want to speak to that question, feel free and chime in.
Well, the budget, for them to change the budget is feasible. It really is. Because a lot of times that the money that we get on law enforcement doesn't go directly to the grassroots of law enforcement. It doesn't go to the guy that's in the police car that's going to show up at your house. They use a lot of the money and the budget goes towards special assignments. Things like training for their special weapons and tactics teams, the SWAT teams. They buy military grade weapons, shields, helmets, and things of that nature. So I think the new budget that the mayor's office in the city has proposed, I think it's a good idea to allocate some of those monies for training. I did see a comment that said, hey, training, you guys get all the training in the world, but bring in other people and pay outside sources to come in with training. That's what you can use some of that money for, is do in-service training. So I think there's some good ideas with doing something different with the money and the budget the way it's set up.
Captain Abram?
I think any budget is can be changed or maneuvered, because with Los Angeles County, their budget is humongous. I'm not sure what the number is right now, but you have to realize that not only is the county so large, but they have the services of all custody, everybody that's incarcerated in LA County, from Lancaster all the way to Catalina. They've got a huge fleet budget. They've got a huge budget with transportation. They have all the transportation, all the buses. They have all the courts. They have most of the Metrolink trains. I mean, it's amazing, all the courts. It's personally, I think it needs to be broken up. That's what I think. I think that the sheriff's department has gotten what they would say too big for your britches.
May I chime in one more thing about budget? Checking social media and watching social media with some of my former colleagues and currently people, the thing that they're upset about the new budget is one, it's selfish, overtime. That's what they're concerned about making more money. That's what really is about with the Los Angeles Police Department and members. They're concerned about getting overtime, and it's monetary. Their concerns are simply monetary, not bettering the police department, not bringing in different services to help us provide good and solid service to the community. They're concerned about their pockets. That's what they're concerned about, and that should be the least concern.
Shannon, we have a question from someone who wanted to know if a community member wants to find out if they have the right to vote, or if their rights have been taken either through incarceration or for whatever, how can they find out how to reinstate their rights?
So there are a number of organizations that I hate that I cannot think of offhand that do that kind of work around voter rights restoration. So if you know that you need to get them restored, one of the first things that you can do is actually reach out. I would honestly just Google voter restoration or something like that, and the county that you're in, because it's different based on the county. Orange County rules may be different from Riverside County rules and different from LA County rules. So I will Google, and oftentimes those nonprofits that do that work will actually be there. If you're not sure if you're registered, I strongly encourage you just to go to Secretary of State's website or your local county registrar's website, and you can put in your information to find out from there. Here's the thing. If you have had your voter rights taken away, they should have notified you when you were coming off probation, the process to get your voter rights restored. I would actually call back to your probation officer and find out, or go back through your records to find out. But even if you don't want to do that, it's honestly just as simple as calling your local registrar recorder and getting that information.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for those comments. Okay, we have a question to Detective Brock and Captain Abram from Maggie. Talk about how the community influence versus law enforcement union pressure.
The union within the Sheriff's Department is extremely powerful, extremely powerful. They pay a lot of money to politicians, and I'm sure Mr. Lawrence can tell you how active they are in Sacramento. Not only are they powerful, like I said, they provide a lot of money to a lot of people, which money talks. As far as the community is concerned, the community can make an impact if they can just get in. You have to get a sit down face-to-face with those people that are in charge to let them know what it is you're trying to do and how you want to become a part of that agency. I have not ever seen really a community organization that came to either a captain at a local station, a chief of police, the sheriff, or even LAPD chief, and not get a sit down to provide an impactful information that organization was going to do something for the community and for law enforcement. Partnering is the best thing in the world. I know when I was captain, I would go to various communities here in the city and just go to the park and meet with anybody who wanted to come to the park that had any questions. You know, that lets people know that they have a voice and you want to hear what they have to say. And that's what you need to do. They've gotten away from that. They don't really do that anymore. Coffee with the captain, you know, going to sit down somewhere in a mall at a, you know, I'm not going to say Starbucks because they're so expensive, but any place where you can sit down and have a cup of coffee, a cafeteria, anywhere. It could be the park. Bring your own coffee. But sit down and have that dialogue with people in the community to find out what the concerns are, because if they know you care, they care. That's the way I feel about it.
Well, may I chime in just on the union thing? The Los Angeles Police Protective League is a very powerful political motor. And I'll echo exactly what my sister Bernice said. And the thing about it is their main concern, the Los Angeles Police Protective League. If you listen to that word, their primary focus is to protect those that protect others. But the community, they do have community forums as the Los Angeles Police Protective League, and they do have a periodical that you should subscribe to. And I'm talking about the community, so that you can be engaged in some of the things that the Los Angeles Police Protective League are engaged in, because they're heavily involved in politics and they have a lot of money coming in. And matter of fact, some of that money coming in has to go to the community. They have a scholarship fund that I guarantee a lot of people on this forum did not know that exists through the Los Angeles Police Protective League. They have a college scholarship fund for community members. So with that being said, get involved with the Los Angeles Police Protective League. They're online, they have a social media thing, and reach out to them. Some of the community-based organizations and some of the politicians get back in with them.
Let me just chime in very, very quickly. So in one of my iterations in my life, I was a union organizer. And, you know, the LAPPL and any other, you know, police union, it's a union, right? It's a labor union. And they should protect the people who are paying dues to them, right? Protect their interests. I mean, that's their job. That's why people are paying dues to them. And if you are a city or county employee, you're probably doing the same thing. And so you would expect the same thing. But and that's why I go back to, that's the reason why it's important that if there's something going on that you don't agree with, if there's a powerful entity, whether that be a labor union, a police union, a group of business owners in the chamber, I don't care what it is. As a member of your community, you have just as much right to organize within yourselves, not only your voice, but organize your money to be able to counteract any of those efforts that are being done, especially during election season. And so don't just think that because they're big and bad that you're not powerful. And what you'll also find is that a lot of those people in the PPL or in that are either in a police union or any kind of worker union, they're also a member of your actual community. And so you can engage them and begin to talk about your issues as an actual community member to them, even though they have a professional association that's politically active as well. And so it's a matter of really, you got to see it like a chessboard and understand that the pawn is just as powerful as a rook if you understand how both of them move.
Powerful, powerful. Thank you all so much for those comments. We are out of time, unfortunately. If you have a comment in the chat box that we did not get to, I promise you I will reach out to the person that those comments were directed at, and we'll send the response via email. So I apologize. This is it's been an impactful discussion. I'm going to bring on Tanya to close us out for this episode 2 of Salon Conversations. If you guys will bear with me. Tanya, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead and close us out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, to our speakers. That was just simply amazing. I've been educated too, and I appreciate it. One of my favorite scriptures is, "This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." It says we, but the thing is that I think it was Pastor Lamb that opened and said about what a day and time that we are in to be Black in America. And, being Black, a mom of a young Black man, we constantly are looking for those role models and things to do to not have them afraid of the police and not have them afraid to walk down the street. But I can tell you that when we have forums like this and people are open and honest and willing to share and give you insight on how to conduct, how to be a part of, how to find solutions, it makes all the difference in the world. As she said, I'm Tanya Fairley. I'm the owner of Root Success Coaching. I also own 2 hair salons. And I appreciate this forum and this format. How you can continue to help, support Black and brown businesses, organizations, and initiatives like Shannon said earlier. There's a list on the screen now, but you got to get involved. You got to get involved. You got to support, because without your support, these organizations, they can't move forward. So we have to all take a part in supporting one another and supporting the things that are important to you that can make a difference in the world. So again, I thank you. I appreciate you all. The speakers were amazing. Michael Brox, I got a message for you from retired LAPD Detective Jeff Childs. He told me to tell you hello. And Dr. Thank you so much for this space and this time, and for allowing me to be a part of Bench to Community. And hopefully we'll see you all again on the rest of our salon sessions.
Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
That's all, folks. Being in the comments. Thank you all so much for being here. I promise we got you all on time. 4 minutes left. I know there are a couple of comments. I wanted to get Tanya in because she has to go pick up her son. So we trying to get Mama to go do what Mamas do, which is everything, supporting everybody all the time. But thank you all so much for being here. I don't know, the two comments, Emily, that had with regards to police, if you, Captain Abram and Detective Brock, if you guys want to tackle that really quickly while the cameras are rolling, we can actually post that on YouTube later. So folks, if you need to go, we understand. Go ahead and log off. But I wanted to really address the two comments that she had before we close out for the evening, if that's okay. That's with you too. Where is the comment?
Did you lose it?
Got it.
You got it? Okay, go ahead and read it out.
Is it in the chat or on the document? It's
on the document, but let's go.
So,
Maya's about to copy and paste it again.
The 95% of LAPD are responding to drug overdoses, homelessness, mental crisis, etc. All issues that they're not trained on. Meanwhile, we're defunding schools, furloughing social and city workers. We do not need more police or better trained police. We need services that help our people thrive.
I'll speak to that.
Go ahead, sis.
Real quickly, not about the LAPD, because I know that our numbers are probably close to the same as far as percentages go with both departments. But as everyone probably knows, we used to have tons of mental health facilities. Now, all those mental health people are in jail. And now they've started putting them out the jail. And that's why we have this big problem with homelessness, because they then put them out of the jail. So it's a tough time. It is really a tough time, but they need those mental health facilities back.
Well, I also say that, we need to employ with some of our budgetary finance, bring in outside sources to deal with the mental health crisis in America.
I would agree.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't know if Emily is still in the chat room, but we'll send this response to her. The last one is LA Police Department has more than 50% of Garcetti's budget. How can any one department justify receiving more than half of a city budget? This seems illogical and seems destined to politicize the department.
Is that a question or a statement?
I think it's a statement, and if you have a response to that, I think Captain Abram stated earlier that the departments are too big. So I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to that.
No, not really.
Not really.
Not me. No. If it was in the form of a question, perhaps.
Emily, they agree with you.
We agree.
Agree.
Folks, that is it. Happy Juneteenth. Thank you for being a part of this celebration / community empowerment forum. We will continue to be having these discussions if you continue to show up, because this is important to all of us. If you have any other words, or Dr. Trevino or anyone else that wants to share, Reverend Lamb, Dr. Clay, if you guys have any closing comments, feel free to share them now, and I will stop talking.
I would. Money is a very important thing. African Americans are responsible for about $1.6 trillion a year in consumerism, and we own about 2% of the wealth in America, right? So if you're going to start leveraging change, it's how do you better utilize and maintain and be stewards over that spending, right? And the wealth that is actually in your possession, and keep it amongst ourselves and be better responsible for funding things that are important to us, right? We outspend every other economic or group or ethnic group in America. Look up the stats. We are responsible for $1.6 trillion of consumerism in America annually. We outspend every other population group, and we only own 2% of the wealth in America. Mind your money, folks. Put it behind some things that are important to you.
Amen.
And the church does.
Amen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, folks.
Peace.
See you guys next time for Salon Conversations episode 3. Appreciate y'all. Y'all be blessed. Stay safe.